Well, the title sure is honest, because yes indeed, we are freed of 50 Shades. 50 Shades Freed is the last movie in this trilogy that has gone on 4 movies too long. This being the last one, I was filled with such effervescent joy as I left the theater that I had kind of this instinct to be nice to the movie and say that it's not half bad. But I must be objective, so I'm going to tell you what you already know. It's all bad. This time around, Anastasia Steele... that has stood the test of time. She and Christian Grey are now married, as we know from the end of the last movie. In fact, the end of the last movie could have been their happy ending, or more appropriately, our happy ending. Not so much for them, because the relationship is so toxic. In any case, that could have been the definitive end, but Jack Hyde, the creepy boss from the last movie, who had 2 scenes that only served to assure that this movie could exist, he is back, and he's out to destroy Anna and Christian. And occasionally, he shows up to be a nuisance. The rest of the movie is the same insufferable padding that we've come to dread. The acting is just as dry, the writing is just as atrocious, the sex scenes are just as jarring, the chemistry is just as not there, and the cinematography is just as... decent. Yeah, that's always been the one praise I can give these movies. They're a little well shot. That's it. Nothing else. Zilch. Nada. Actually, the only aspect of this movie that is worse than the other movies is the soundtrack. It is overkill. I guess so many current music artists saw how profitable the soundtracks for the other movies were, because quite literally every other scene in this movie has a new track blaring over the top of it. It gets tiresome very fast. There are even so many that a few are sporadically placed where they don't fit. There's an upbeat track by the Spencer Lee Band that accompanies a sequence where Anna and Christian are in their Audi trying to evade an unidentified person following them. That's not even the time to be playing a song, but if you're going to, shouldn't it have been something more eerie? Basic Filmmaking 101. Speaking of that chase scene, as soon as Anna and Christian evade their unknown follower, they pull over to catch their breath, and then, spur of the moment, I'm not making this up, they start getting it on right there and then in the car. No! People don't do that! This movie is asinine! Just like its predecessors, 50 Shades Freed has no grasp of a flowing narrative or 3-act structure. Throughout the movie, different generic conflicts ensue between them, and every one of them is resolved almost instantly with them just kissing and making up. Early in the movie, Christian walks in on Anna interviewing some author as part of her job, and as the author leaves, Christian has such a laughable degree of jealousy that he says to Anna, "Well, he's a handsome guy. Tell me this isn't really the man that the women of this generation want." And then they start having an argument about how Anna is still using her maiden name for her job. It gets resolved easily. They later have an argument about Anna spending too much time with her friends. It gets resolved easily. Christian feels not ready to be a father, so he's frustrated and inexplicably angered at Anna when she tells him that she's pregnant. Again, it gets resolved easily. The most baffling thread that's left hanging is when Anna learns that Christian had a meetup with Elena, his former dominant. She doesn't appear in this movie, I presume because Kim Basinger realized what a wreck she was in 50 Shades Darker. So this is the point where the movie actually decides to have them drift apart for a while, and they come back together again during the climax. And afterwards, Christian's meetup with Elena is never brought up again at all. And by the way, that climax involves Jack showing up one more time to be a nuisance. He calls Anna and shows her a photo of her sister-in-law tied up and gagged, and he demands $5 million of Christian's money for her release. Now, the second time he calls Anna, we see him shaking his hand as he cartoonishly remarks, "Man, she's a feisty one, she bit me." You gagged her, and she bit you. Think, writers, please, for 1 minute, think! Even scenes that are supposed to be emotional are completely heartless, like when Anna tells Christian that the grave site of his birth mother has been found. They visit the grave as it's raining, of course, they lay some flowers on it, say nothing, and the movie moves on its merry way. It rushes through every conflict and every emotional scene with no purpose, and just expects you to automatically feel for the characters. Sorry, but you had 2 entire movies prior to this to make me feel anything for them. There's not any chance I'm going to now. Of course, the movie has to run through any emotional scene quickly, because it needs to leave more than enough room for the BDSM crap, which is brain-numbingly repetitive and goes on for what feels like longer than the sex scenes in the room. If this movie wasn't so painfully padded, they cut out all the sex scenes, all the pointless conflicts, and all the plot threads with no payoff, you'd be left with maybe a 15-minute movie that's not good, but at least it's brief and to the point. But the number one thing that has just irked me about all these movies since the beginning is that it glamorizes such a toxic relationship where this woman wholeheartedly submits herself to this man's habits, despite hating them, and allows him to control her every doing because she just decided that she can't live without him. For some of this movie, it seems like they're trying to start making Anna an equal in her relationship, but that's not how it ends. Now normally I would say spoiler alert, but there's nothing to spoil, there's no plot. As the final insult, Christian enters his playroom to find Anna there waiting, and she says to him, "I am here for your pleasure." That's the note that this movie, and therefore the franchise, ends on. This all goes to show that these are not just terrible movies, they're terrible for us. Overall, this movie, like the ones before it, was an inane, fatuous, detrimental abomination against humanity. And like the ones before it, it's horribly demeaning to women, which we already have the Women's March for, we don't need this too. I sat there the whole time just begging for anything that might have been redeeming, for anything the least bit interesting to happen. But I don't know why I bothered. I was watching the third 50 Shades of Grey movie, for crying out loud. 6% for 50 Shades Freed. Good riddance to the worst movie trilogy of all time. Don't see this movie. If you need a romantic fix, wait for Every Day to come out, wait for Midnight Sun to come out, anything but 50 Shades Freed. Let's make one of these things bomb for once, and rest assured that it never comes back. Let's just keep this franchise dead, buried in the ground, build a city over it, and keep the mother box as far away from it as possible. That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I really hope you found this review helpful. Like if you liked, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop. Praise Jesus. It's finally over. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We're free to 50 Shades. No more 50 Shades. Hallelujah. 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 We shall not mourn the end of Twilight porn. Hallelujah. We've seen the final blow to this crap show. It's over forever. Hallelujah. 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 Freed of 50 Shades.